evening and welcome to the City of Warrenville Community Development and Planning Committee of the Whole regular meeting for Monday, May 13th, 2019. Clerk, may I please have the roll call?
Alderman Ashour.
Here.
Alderman Berry.
Here.
Alderman Bevere.
Here.
Alderman Davalos.
Here.
Alderman Goodman.
Here.
Alderman Krischel.
Here.
Alderman Widener.
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Now will everyone please stand and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's time for citizens' comments. I don't believe that anyone has signed up this evening, so we'll go ahead with officials and staff members' comments, beginning with the mayor. Mayor Brummel?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Chairman, apologize
That's
for
okay.
that. Two things tonight. One, a reminder that the bike rodeo takes place this Saturday morning from 9 to 12 across the way at the gazebo. Free bikes for kids. Whoever shows up and registers for the raffle gets a chance at a free bike. We have, I think, a dozen that are going to be given away, brand new bikes from Target. Kids that don't have helmets can get helmets. If they have their own bikes and they need some mechanical checkups and work on them, we have a mechanic that'll be there to help out with that. And it's just a lot of fun. So come on out, 9 to 12, across the way at the gazebo for the annual bike rodeo. And the day before that, Friday the 17th, we have Cop on a Rooftop in support of the Special Olympics Illinois program again. We have 2 Dunkin' Donuts in town. Officers will be at each of these locations from 5 in the morning until 12 noon. Stop out, say hello, get some memorabilia, and support our officers and also support Special Olympics Illinois. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Alderman? Alderman Bevere?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up about the rain we had the past couple weeks, had like 5.5, 5.25 inches. And I just want to say thank you to the Public Works Department, the project that was done up on Lakeview. Them people had no standing water at all. And any little rain, it was puddled up back there before. So, and that was a really good test. And just wanted to say everybody did a great job, and I'd like to see more projects like that to help people out. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Seems like all the projects that occurred along the river in the last 5-10 years have paid dividends after that rain. Clerk Larson?
Thank you, Chairman. It seems like it's a long way away, but I want you to save October the 3rd in your calendars for the America in Bloom Symposium, which is in St. Charles this year. And Warrenville is entering the national contest, so we are going to go with guns blazing. And particularly, they have a session at 4 o'clock for the mayor and elected officials, a reception. And then at that evening, each of the cities that have entered the contest will present their pictures and their program and what they've accomplished. And so it would be really nice if we have as many as you can come as possible. And we'll send out Dorothy Deer will send out a formal letter, but time seems to be going faster nowadays, and I don't want the summer to be gone, but I do want you to put that on your calendars. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, I wanted to remind everybody also about a Warrenville in Bloom event. Our Volunteer Planting Day is coming up on, I believe it is Saturday the 25th. And we'll meet out here in front of City Hall at the gazebo starting at 8:30. And we're going to be planting in the areas in front of City Hall and in front of local businesses and all around town where people let us just to get the flowers out for the spring season. So please come on out and get your hands dirty and help out Warrenville in Bloom and beautify our wonderful city.
Now, do people need to bring their own tools for that, or will there be trowels and digging instruments provided?
If you have tools and are willing to help bring them, then bring them along. But yes, there will be some tools for people to use if you don't have anything to bring or if you forget yours or something. But bring gloves and dress for the weather, because even if it rains, we're going to be out there planting. We usually do.
Great, thank
Thank
you.
you.
We'll look forward to that. Anyone else? Okay, let's begin the business of the meetings. This evening's first agenda item is the presentation of Complete Streets Policy Process, and Deputy Public Works Director Phil Kukler will provide us with the details on this agenda item. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you and good evening. Staff of the city contracted with Epstein to help draft a complete streets policy for the city. Tim Gustafson is a senior planner with Epstein, and he's here to provide a presentation about the complete streets and the policy development process. So I'll turn this over to Tim. He's got a PowerPoint presentation, which we included a hard copy of that at the dais for everybody.
Good evening. How's the volume on that one? Good evening. Thank you for having me here to present on this project. I appreciate being invited to speak and wanted to give you a brief overview. As Phil mentioned, my name is Tim Gustafson. I am a senior planner with Epstein, and we were providing complete streets policy development services for the city. And just about a month ago, I presented to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission and wanted to give you an overview of what the policy development process entails, and then open it up to questions if you may have some, so that you're familiar with what's going to happen over the course of the summer. So tonight's discussion wants to touch on defining what complete streets are. That'll be the first item. And then what is a policy to address complete streets, and how does that relate to everything else that the city is currently working on? Then walk you through a little bit of a development process, and then, as I mentioned, open it up to questions. So complete streets are streets that are designed to be accommodating to users of all ages and abilities. So complete streets are meant to be able to accommodate transportation of any mode that you choose to use to move through the city, whether you're using transit, walking, bicycling, driving, delivering freight, delivering vehicles. And it makes it easy to cross the street and travel through our city. So this is a philosophy that's designed in order to encourage people to travel in whichever mode they feel necessary. It's also thought of as a system and as a network. So not every mode is accommodated on every street. For example, you can't walk on I-88 for obvious reasons. So we're context sensitive, we're context aware. So it's important to consider that this is a policy, this is an approach, this is a culture that we wish to help embrace. And so this is something that many cities take on in an effort to improve quality of life, increase efficiency in spending and decision-making and prioritization. So a complete streets policy is a formal commitment to that philosophy. So by adopting a complete streets policy, you're demonstrating a commitment to talking about accommodation of users of all modes, ages, and abilities whenever you have the opportunity to do so. So it's a bit of a culture shift in that it helps you support improving your community by having this conversation whenever facilities are created, maintained, or reconstructed. It's also important to identify what complete streets are not. So this is an important consideration because it's not something that states that you're going to do just one project as a standalone. This is not an exception from the rule. This is actually changing what the new culture happens to be. It's also not a mandate to tear everything up and start over. A lot of people are concerned does this bind us in having to fix everything right away? And the answer is no. But a complete streets policy makes sure that you can constantly move forward and improve upon the transportation network at every opportunity. It's also not the same solution on every street. Again, there are some facilities where you will not be able to walk or bike for various reasons, and the policy does identify those situations in which an exception may apply. So you're not required to do it if it's cost prohibitive, you're not required to do it if it's an illegal movement. So there's lots of very common sense things that are built into the policy that don't bind you in having to do something that doesn't make any sense. It's also not a reshuffling or a reprioritization of existing planning initiatives that the city is currently implementing. So a lot of people do ask, they say, does this replace our bike plan? Does this replace our ADA transition plan? And that's not what a policy is intended to do. A policy is intended to further strengthen your ability to implement those plans and allow you to be flexible and opportunistic in helping to implement those projects. However, project prioritization often is something that is a product or an outcome of this process, so it states that you're able to focus more attention or resources where it's needed based on how the policy has been developed. So, policy elements. The National Complete Streets Coalition, which is the advocacy body that actually develops these policy elements, has divided it into 10 key components, and the ideal complete streets policies that have been adopted around the state and around the nation usually contain very discrete and clear and easy to identify elements. So these are the 10 elements: a vision and intent, a statement about the diverse nature of users that you are choosing to accommodate. So if this is a community where you wish to highlight attending to the needs of seniors or of children or persons with disabilities, this is language that can be included inside the policy. It also embraces a commitment to projects of various phases. So when you're in the planning phase, or when you're actually designing something, or even after something is built and you're doing annual or seasonal maintenance on a facility, this policy applies as to how you approach each of those activities. As I mentioned, you do want to have some exceptions because there are some common sense exceptions that need to be in there. The fewer that you have and the more narrowly defined those are, the clearer and stronger the policy may be. And then you also have identification of jurisdiction. So the Complete Streets policy may not just apply to the city, but that you also demonstrate a commitment to working with DuPage County or with the state of Illinois or other entities that may be responsible for building and maintaining transportation networks. It also has elements of how you approach design, which design guidelines you refer to already, and which ones you wish to consult if you wish to be more flexible. The land use and context sensitivity, as I mentioned at the beginning, is an important consideration. There's certain areas where it doesn't make sense to accommodate every mode. You certainly wouldn't want heavy vehicles running through a cul-de-sac all the time, nor would you want to put bicyclists in a very difficult or challenging situation. So the land use and the context of the network is also an important consideration. Identifying your performance measures. How will you know if you're moving in the right direction? Are crashes going down? Are speeds going down? Are more people walking and bicycling to certain city events? You're able to track your progress if you decide what you wish to measure and how frequently you wish to do so. Project selection criteria. This gets at the points that I mentioned, discussing what are the things that we value as a city and how do you wish to elevate projects that are more important, or if there's a potential project where you can work with the neighboring municipality or the county or the state, does this allow you to shift your focus accordingly? And then finally, the implementation steps. This is an important consideration, saying this is how we will move forward. These are the people that work at the city that will help implement, and these are the systems that we will use to check our progress as we go forward. So the policy development process that we have laid out for this service is actually to go through the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee and working with city staff to develop the policy. There's a few elements where I've prepared a draft memorandum of best practices from other municipalities around the state, as well as drawing on some best practices from around the country to see how these are written, what they sound like, how long are they. Typically, most of them are between 3 and 5 pages. So we're not talking about a very extensive tome, but it's a very clear and concise policy. So after the best practices case study memo, Phil requested that we put together a theoretical thought exercise that estimates a certain level of financial commitment based on the various aspects of implementing this policy. So we're going to do kind of a high, medium, and low cost estimate to show what the financial impact would be of retrofitting an entire transportation network with additional facilities, whether they be for bicycling, walking, or a combination of the two. We will then develop a draft policy and circulate that between the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee and city staff. Make sure it contains the elements that are necessary, what the city would like to see included, the wording, the language, and the tone, and the strength of the language. And then we will deliver a final policy, and that will be the point at which there is a formal recommendation for some council action. So up until that point, it's all informational with some Q&A back and forth. This will include meetings with city staff. We've already had a couple of those meetings, and we'll continue through the summer. The first Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting was where we had the brainstorming and talked about the general idea of what they would like to see included. And then the public meetings, which include presenting here this evening, as well as going before, community development this evening, and then a formal presentation to City Council later in the summer. So this is where we are on the schedule. We are in this month of May, and we're keeping on track so far. And we'll be delivering a draft policy later on this summer with the additional items that I mentioned just before, and then going before Community Development and Plan Commission in September. So at this point, I wanted to open it up, see if there's any questions that you have at this point in time, or if there's anything that you know from your experience of other municipalities or other complete streets policies that you'd like to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Gustafson. I just wanted to add one thing. At the Bicyclist and Pedestrian Advisory Group meeting where you spoke to us about the Complete Streets program and the diversity of users. We mentioned the fact that the City of Warrenville has a number of equestrians, and that we discussed that they would be sure to be included as part of the diversity of users who would be included in any Complete Streets policy that the city drafts and potentially approves. So with that, are there any other questions or comments? Alderman Goodman?
So you've already presented this to the BPAC. What came out of that discussion so far?
So the discussions that we entertained at that meeting were about the nature of what types of users, as Alderman Widener mentioned, what types of users are typically included. So that's where we expanded it to make sure that we could talk about any different types of users, whether they be people walking, bicycling, driving, using transit. We talked a little bit about emergency vehicles, school buses, and also a focus about the safety impacts of wanting to better accommodate users of these different modes and abilities. Helps to speak to some of the interest that the city has on improving safety for everybody as well. So that was a concern that I think came up in that discussion. There was one item, and that's what I did to actually amend tonight's presentation slightly for you here tonight, is a lot of questions regarding whether or not this usurps or overwrites or replaces any existing plans. So I wanted to emphasize that it does not do that. Rather, it strengthens and further empowers the city to implement those plans. So that was a focus of how this relates to the existing bikeway improvement projects, traffic calming, which I know is on tonight's agenda, and other initiatives. So primarily the focus of the policy helps city staff, administration, stakeholders, and residents have a conversation every time to make sure that there's an opportunity to think about ways that these users can be incorporated. So rather than the why not is why aren't we trying to incorporate each time moving forward. So the tone helped us kind of create this as an opportunity to be opportunistic. And that was definitely something that they felt was of value. They also discussed quite a bit on that they pride themselves and wish to continue to pride ourselves on being fiscally responsible, and that this allows us to be very common sense and pragmatic moving forward and not just doing everything because we have the policy now, but rather this policy allows us to be very methodical in our approach.
Follow-up?
Okay,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
just two more things. I don't see in your project schedule necessarily public outreach opportunities. Is that not part of the process?
That was not scoped as an item that was necessary for the process, primarily because the policy is very much non-infrastructural. It's not a project-based opportunity, and that the interactions with the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission provides for that kind of interaction between what they anticipate residents and staff would be interested in seeing. So there are projects where you can scope it to include as such. I was at a meeting earlier today where we're doing a very similar project attached as part of a bike plan. But the policy development task itself does not actually include any specific or targeted outreach.
Okay, my last question is, I know the name of this is Complete Streets. I know the focus of what you're talking about has to do with streets that are for cars and bikes and pedestrians as well. But does your policy and will the details that you work through also apply to places where there are paths with no streets? I can think of several places in town where we're thinking about possible connections, but where there may not be any road right now, like between Fox Hollow and Maple Hill, or the Prairie Path in places which runs where there is no street, or the sidewalk connection between Country Ridge and River Oaks, and various other places around town, walking paths, pedestrian bridges. Is that all connected, everything that people are traveling on, or is this really just about streets?
That's an excellent question, and the answer is yes. It does actually cover the entire transportation network, whether or not that network happens to be a street. So the policy will probably make references to the fact that there is a multimodal transportation network within the city. And also it makes commitments to improving those connections between the on-street facilities, sidewalks, shared use paths that are traveling through forest preserves, and even making connections to other agencies. So working with the Forest Preserve District, working with neighboring communities, working with DuPage County for any side paths they may maintain that don't necessarily travel along a right-of-way. So the policy will speak to those connections and does continue to enable you to coordinate and implement the policy on all of that transportation system. Yeah.
Alderman Davalos?
Thank you. Your chart on page 2, at the top right, any way to get a bigger one of that? Just to help in the education process of Complete Streets? Because my questions surround sidewalks, and I can't really read the part you've got in there for the pedestrians. So is there any way, is it on the website or somewhere, or can you provide that maybe? I would be interested in having that, or I can read it.
Certainly. And actually, as I mentioned in the scope of work, there is a best practices memo that I prepared for Mr. Kukler that walks through the elements of a policy. And the memo also contains links to the National Complete Streets website. And the coalition has an excellent series of informational slides and presentations. They're the only ones that can actually give said presentation, but they are very generous with sharing their content. So I can make that available if that is of interest,
Great.
yes.
Yes. My issue is just if, I'm sure you've had, I'm asking if you had preliminary discussions with staff, and I'm sure you have on sidewalks. I'm sure, since I can't see this, I'm assuming sidewalks are included in this, not just, okay. So that's an issue here. If you, every time we have a public hearing, not a public hearing, but a public input session through the years, there are several people that always talk about when are we getting sidewalks, why don't we have sidewalks, and we have to go through this whole thing about there's a logical reason why all of our streets don't. And so my question is, I guess that's been talked about and that will sort of be included. There's at least been a beginning discussion on whatever existing policies we have that are sort of official. I don't know if we have a lot, but how to coordinate that, because that will come up.
Yes, that's an excellent question, and we have had discussions about that very early in the process. That was made very clear, is that there's varying levels of enthusiasm and interest in completing sidewalk networks, and that is something that will be vetted during this policy development process. And the reason Public Works has been expressing an interest in this is it allows them to go through that discussion and then have a more formalized and publicly visible way of explaining how we're going to move forward, how much money we can set aside that is reasonable and within our means to deliver those types of projects. And then it also allows for the city to begin that prioritization process. So the policy itself will not prioritize the sidewalks, but it'll allow the city to move forward and say, okay, now that we have a policy and we have an understanding of where the needs are, we can then go through this process and actually have something that we can deliver because it has come up. So that is something that we'll be exploring.
Great, thank you.
I do not see any other questions or comments. Thank you very much, Mr. Gustafson, for your excellent report. We look forward to working with you and seeing the rest of the policy as it develops.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Again, that was for informational only. Our next item on the agenda is consideration of a request for proposals for citywide services and staffing study. And City Administrator John Coakley will provide the details on this as much as his voice will allow him to provide the details. And at that point, he may toss it over to Ms. White. Thank you. John?
Thank you, Denon. Thank you. As Chairman just mentioned, I'm a little under the weather, so you're all in luck. I'm going to talk less than more tonight. And if I can't finish, Christina has volunteered to jump in and complete whatever we need to go over for this issue. This is the city services and staffing study. This is just what's on the agenda tonight is a proposal, the draft request for proposals that we would send out, but it does kick off the whole process to get this study started. There's a couple of quick points that I would remind you. This is included in the budget. We've been talking about the need to look globally, if you will, at the whole city for a while now, to just assess the services that we deliver, and then, of course, the staffing that has to provide those and the options. There is a need that has been growing for the current level of services and staffing based on the growth the community has experienced over the last couple of decades. We have done some studies in individual departments and done some what I'd call tweaking, adjusting staffing here or there to meet a specific need, but we haven't looked at a global need across the city. And then, of course, there is also, I've been told, some growth that may be coming to the city in terms of population. And it's a good timing, therefore, to look at this now because we can take into account the projects, especially the housing, but also any other commercial projects that are being approved and are either under construction now or shortly will be under construction, and take those into account. The ultimate result would be to look at the current needs and determine what we need in the short term. Also look at a longer term. I would, I believe mentions, or we will direct the successful consultant to a 5-year horizon for looking that far out. That's something that we can plan for pretty well and develop an implementation. We can talk about things that are beyond a 5-year horizon, but it's very hard to predict and project what's coming down the pike as things change so quickly in this current environment, technology, and just all kinds of other things. The outcomes would be to get recommendations at the end of the study from the consultant with specific action steps for implementation and a phasing in process and timeline. So again, over a 5-year period, what needs to be done right away, what needs to be done within a couple of years, and how those would happen. I envision it to be more like the Public Works staffing and study recommendations, both those of the consultant and of our staff, with that kind of timing and the specific action steps when we get a resulting product. And then just as a reminder, this is just for the staffing, services and staffing study. After that is done, also included in this fiscal year would be a space needs and facilities assessment. That is not part of tonight's action, but it's just a reminder. Once we finish and determine what the right level, quality type of services the community, the council wishes to have, and the staffing options to provide them. They may be consulting services, we may find a contract with another governmental body may do, or we may bring it in-house and hire people. At that point, we need to look at our buildings and our facilities, which many are now reaching 20 years old. Are they right-sized? Are they, is the space within the buildings allocated properly, and make a decision? But one would follow the other, and for that, we'll answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the alderman? Alderman Goodman?
So the action steps would be like the action steps that we have in that, 40-ish point Public Works staffing and services study that we already have, where we can keep track very carefully of which things have made progress when. And because that was a very good, I thought, end product as an example of something that we didn't do for the strategic plan, for example. But being able to go through one by one and mark up very specifically how much progress, when expected completion dates might be, that's all. I saw in here that it says action steps, but at what level and at what degree of detail are we expecting, and how will that be communicated to the people who are trying to do this work?
I think that's the end of John's voice. Assistant City Administrator Christina White will take over from here.
Pinch hitting. So yes, the idea and what we talked about with the action steps would be to get similar level of detail to what's in the Public Works study so that we can monitor progress and report on the individual action steps. It is mentioned, I believe, multiple times in the RFP document itself. It will be reiterated during the pre-proposal meeting with the potential consultants, and again, when we're looking at the contract development in much more specific detail about what we expect as the outcome.
Okay, so saying that these are our goals, it's going to be broken down into specific concrete individual tasks and individual items that the staff can work on themselves, and there's not going to be any need for any further consultant to be an intermediary for that or to interpret that.
Correct. That's the outcome, is to have actionable items that are specific with measurements of time of what's anticipated and how long it will take. And to John's point, having something that's broken out into probably a 5-year plan with short-term and long-term goals, but it will be very specific action items that we can follow. The only potential additional consulting I can foresee is if there's something specific to a staffing need that's identified that they're recommending or that we recommend be a consultant rather than a full-time or part-time actual employee. But we will not need to hire a consultant to develop the action items from this. That should be part of this project and will be part of what's expected in the contract with this vendor or with the consultant.
Okay, because some of these action steps might involve, costing out how much a consultant would be to take over a particular task that is currently done in-house and that sort of thing. So is that something we would then be able to do in-house to figure out what those quotes would be or to figure out what the outside work would be? Or are we expecting them to put together action steps just for staff to do or action steps that would require further consultation?
We anticipate that they will put together action steps that staff can do. Part of what John and I also discussed is if there are cost implications to the action steps, including some of that information as part of the final report that we receive. So in cases where there is a scenario where they're recommending potentially adding staff or replacing staff with consultants or something to that effect, we would want them to include a cost projection. That's not exactly the same thing as actually providing a quote. We would still have to go do our due diligence, but those action steps would be things that staff could follow up on. And we will be part of that process in developing with the consultant what are reasonable action steps and the timeliness that goes along with that.
Okay, because it's our hope that whoever responds to this RFP is an expert on what the independent contractor going rate would be to televise city council meetings, for example, or that sort of thing. Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions or comments? If not, this is an item that requires a motion. Alderman Berry?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the City Council authorize staff to issue the request for proposals for a citywide services and staffing study.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is an informational item. It's the Enterprise Resource Planning presentation, and Assistant City Administrator Christina White and Finance Director Kevin Dahlstrom will provide us the information on this agenda topic.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Oh, I knew I was going to get interference with this thing. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. We're going to switch. Because I'm sure you don't all want to hear 10 minutes of interference from the microphone. We're going to go this route, and if you can't hear me, let me know, and I will speak louder. Thank you. So I will kind of start off and lead the presentation. Finance Director Dahlstrom will jump in and fill in any gaps that I leave behind. But as you may all recall, last year we began a project to implement an enterprise resource planning solution, commonly called the ERP or Dynamics 365. We received some feedback recently that the council wanted some additional information, especially in light of the extension of the timelines on the project plans. So we're going to provide an overview of where we are with the current project, what led to some of the project delays in the timeline, and cover what's left to complete. So the way that we have this split up this evening is kind of in two parts. You may have heard us refer to the ERP as a singular project, but within that project is Dynamics 365, which is the core finance, accounting, HR, payroll. And then part B is the Mazik City component, which is community development, public works, and an outward-facing resident services portal. So we're going to start with Dynamics 365, which again is finance, accounting, HR, and payroll. We commonly refer to it as the core ERP functions. We started the project with a kickoff in May of 2018. So we're just about a year in. The original implementation schedule was 14 months with a go-live of June. That's since been pushed back to an October go-live date, which we'll get into reasons in a little bit. This is a visual diagram of that timeline that's been updated with the October go-live date. If you're looking at this, the star here at the bottom is the go live. That's what we're trying to get to. We are currently in this development phase right here, and we are coming up to towards the end of that project phase. with the timeline, these are the 5 phases that are broken down into the timeline. So again, we're in the development stage currently, which is marked by the star. The analysis phase is where we started. The analysis phase was effectively an overview of our current processes. So we developed a series of requirements based on current process and based on needs with the Mazik team and the Baycor team. We determined what those needs were. We mapped out those processes, established requirements. There was a total of almost 700 requirements that came out of just the financial accounting, HR payroll part of that. We went through an initial round of testing. That initial round was basically the functions that the Dynamics 365 system came with out of the box. We reviewed the fits and gaps, which are defined. The fits are defined as requirements the city established that came with the functionality that Dynamics offered out of the box without any real customization or configuration. The level of gaps, those are requirements that the city asked for and had that required customizing and configuration from Mazik to make it work. So generally speaking, the core functionality of Dynamics could do all of the things that at a basic level we would want, but if we added anything additional to that that wasn't part of the system, that requires customizing. We also determined what integrations would be needed. Integrations are basically a bridge between the ERP software and current city software. So a good example of an integration is the integration between D365 and Laserfiche, which is our document management system. While the ERP has some functionality to act as a document management system, we already had that in Laserfiche, where we keep all of our agendas, our resolutions, our ordinances, meeting minutes, personnel files, electronic personnel files are in there. So to take all of that and recreate it in Dynamics 365 didn't make sense. So we were going to build upon what we have in Laserfiche and create that bridge between the two software so that they communicate with each other. Moving on. This is an example of a process that we had to develop going through this. So I know it's a little bit hard to read and it's not really intended for you to read all of the little boxes in between, but it's more of a visual representation of developing a process. So this is one process, employee recruitment through this system. So every requirement that we developed, especially those that required some level of customization, we had to go from what is the end result that we wanted and kind of back our way through start to finish. So every decision within the system that needs to be made requires an activity and it requires a decision of where to go from there. So if I want to hire an employee and there needs to be an approval process, what does that approval process look like? Who does it go to? What's the workflow? If the answer to that approval is yes, what happens next? If it's no, where does it go? How does it get rerouted? So this was a good example of just kind of all of the different steps and bubbles that had to be decided upon to get to an end result. So we are, like I said, currently wrapping up the development phase. Design and development, we reviewed best practices with both the Baycor team and the Mazik team. We developed solutions for the gaps. So with Core, we ended up with 336 gaps, which again were things that required customization, requirements that required some level of customizing. As Mazik started to program customizations, that is where we ran into some decisions that had to be made on issues that weren't out of the box. So specifically with HR payroll, human resources and payroll, we ran into some snags. Part of that is because while the system has some ability to do basic HR functions, there were some limitations to what it could do and how much it could be configured. Add to that government comes with a certain level of complexities, especially when you're talking about payroll. So a good example of that was we have a scheduling system that the police department uses. Because of the complexities with the different shifts and the overtime rules and making sure that we have enough people and the way that you look at the schedule, they don't look at a schedule on a 5-day work week. It's across 28 days over a period of a month. Trying to build that schedule into a new system would have been overly complicated and likely would have not been useful to them as the current system is, which is built for police departments. So we decided as a group that trying to rebuild that functionality didn't make sense, but we should integrate the current schedule with D365 because we need to pull that information from PACE, which is what the software is called, into D365 to run payroll. And we need that information in order to run payroll properly, but there was a lot of decisions that were involved with that. So that is one example of when you start peeling back the layers of what's required with this kind of a system and the decisions that need to be made when you're going from a predominantly manual paper process to an automated electronic process, what that looks like. And a good example that someone shared is when you're going through a construction project. You have an idea when you're walking into the project what you might be looking at and what you're trying to accomplish, but once you start peeling back the drywall and you realize your electric is outdated or your plumbing is outdated and you have to fix all of those things to move forward, that's kind of what we ran into here. And it didn't make sense for us to try to continue along the process and not fix those things and not address them and not do it the right way and end up with something that didn't work ultimately in the end. So that's where we had to take a step back, and that delayed the timeline quite a bit to figure out what were the workarounds or solutions to some of the issues that came up along the way with things that the system either couldn't do or that we were asking for that's a little bit different than what the out-of-the-box solution could provide. And again, that a lot of that complexity came with the current manual processes, because when you are doing something on paper, you can't just take that process and repeat it in an automated electric format. You have to change your process, and then we had to make decisions about whether we should change the process based on what the system could do or whether we needed configurations or customizations because there was an end result that we wanted to get to that was slightly different. So that's where we left off with HR. So what's remaining with Dynamics 365? As I said, we're wrapping up the development phase. We just went through about a few days last week of testing on the finance and payroll gaps and the solutions that they put together. We have another round of testing coming up at the end of this month for 3 weeks, Kevin? Yeah, 3 weeks of testing. At that point, we will see processes from start to finish, and with all the customizations and with the city's data. So that'll be the first time that we're seeing some of the data files that we've submitted to Mazik actually make it into the system and all of the customizations that we've asked for. There will be another round of testing with end users, with some of the kind of front level people that haven't had a lot of hands-on with the software up until this point. We'll go through several iterations of training, develop our operating manuals, and then with finance and accounting, because we have a current system in place, we will run some concurrent processes. And the point of that is we already have a financial and accounting software that outputs the correct information. So we want to run reports, and we want to run a list of bills, and we want to run a payroll concurrently between MSI, the current system, and Dynamics 365 to make sure that the outputs are coming out the same, that whatever customizations and configurations and programming that's been done on the back end with Dynamics 365 ends up with the same output for those processes. Again, the paper processes, there's nothing to run concurrently, so we'll have to test again and again to make sure that those processes are working correctly. And then, assuming all goes well, our go live, again, is now October 4th. That is the goal that we're all working towards. I can tell you that Kevin and Leo and I, who are involved in every aspect of this project, will be grateful to have it get to the finish line, and no one wants to see that happen more than me and Kevin. So then moving forward into Mazik City, you're gonna see a lot of the same information. So again, Mazik City, just as a reminder, is somewhat of a custom design. It's not a out-of-the-box solution. It's built on the Dynamics 365 platform, but Mazik is building out all of the aspects of community development and public works that we wanted to see as part of this project, as well as the outward-facing portal. We started in May of 2018. It was supposed to be a 17-month schedule with a go-live originally of October 2019. This is another visual of the timeline. Again, go-live is the star down here. In this case, we are wrapping up the analysis phase, which is kind of right here and getting into the design phase of this. Again, we're in analysis of the 5 phases. So with the analysis, again, comes the reviewing of our current processes. Unlike the Dynamics 365 finance and accounting portion, basically all of what's being built in Mazik is coming from a more paper, manual, Excel file kind of process. So there isn't a whole lot of data to pull from a current system or processes to pull from a current system. So there's a lot of time spent developing those processes. As you may recall, we brought Baycor in to help with some of that process development because we realized pretty early on, again, it's not a one-for-one when you're going from a paper manual process to an electronic process. There is a lot to consider in terms of the workflows and where everything leads from start to finish. So staff has spent a lot of time with Baycor and with Mazik developing those needs. They've established about 945 requirements for that system. We've again established that there's some integrations that are needed. And then the one difference is the potential addition of utility billing. When we originally started this project, utility billing was not in the scope. That was because at the time, Mazik did not have a solution for utility billing, but as we went through and talked about requirements, a lot of the functionality that we're building in for all the other parts of community development and public works and what's being customized in Dynamic 365 basically lays the foundation for what we need for utility billing. And Mazik felt pretty confident that they could use that base foundation to build upon for what we needed with utility billing. So we've talked through that with them. We've gone through some requirements gathering discussions, and we feel pretty confident that they understand our needs. And in speaking to Kevin and finance staff, that was something that we would have had to go out and start an entire new project for once we completed the implementation on this. So again, we're using MSI currently. That's an outdated software. It's not going to be supported forever. Eventually, we'll have to replace it. Going through another implementation with a different software, learning a different software and trying to integrate it back with Dynamics 365 because there needs to be a connection between utility billing and the financial side of things is going to likely take more time and be less cost effective than trying to build something in with this. So we are recommending including it in the project. And again, we're pretty confident that they can accomplish it based on the discussions that we've had. But that will likely add to those 945 requirements as we get through that process. So again, this is a visual of the type of process development that we've gone through. I could see Ron's head starting to hurt just looking at this again, but these are the types of decisions and discussions that we had to have. This is an example of preventative maintenance for public works and all of the things that would be involved in that type of a process. What's remaining in Mazik City? So as I said, we're wrapping up analysis phase. We're entering into the review of gaps. Major difference again here from Dynamics 365 is because we don't already have a system built and we're building on top of a platform, but it's effectively a customized system. All of the requirements are gaps because there isn't anything that's coming out of a box. So that is a little bit different. We'll be heading into initial testing soon and then followed by a review of the design, the development that they do on Mazik's end, and then deployment with additional testing, training, and so on. So you may be asking yourself, why are we doing this? As a reminder, this is why. These are the anticipated outcomes. Ultimately, when we get to the end of this process, what we're expecting is a more efficient, automated set of internal processes, which makes the city staff function at a more productive rate. It gives us the ability to gather data and information, to track data information, and to turn that around to see trends. It'll give us the ability to share information across departments, which right now is sometimes challenging because you may not have access to the paper file that someone is keeping on a certain property because you're not sure which file cabinet it's in. It will allow us to integrate with current city software to make more efficient use of those options, and ultimately will lead to improved delivery of services because if staff is more efficient and effective in the way that we're completing our work and in the ability to track information and review information, then we can turn around requests for information at a quicker pace. We can answer questions at a quicker pace. We can just deliver those services better. With Mazik City, same thing. It's the efficient, automated internal and external processes. I specifically included external because generally you look at the core ERP as sort of the operating software for the city. It's what allows us to effectively do the business processes that we do every day. But Mazik City will have a outward-facing portal where residents can go to apply for a permit. They can see that process. They can get updates on where their permit is in the queue. They can have one stop to pay for their water bill, their permit fees, or any other fees or expenses that they have related to city services. It will provide an easier way to submit service requests. So if they're driving down the street and see a downed tree, a pothole, water, whatever the case may be, they can get to the portal through their phone or through a device and submit a service request that Public Works will get pretty much instantaneously and be able to respond. Although we would still recommend if there's an emergency to call and not send it through the portal because emergencies are important. And then ultimately, it will give the field staff portable access. So when Public Works or the inspectors are out doing their work, they will be able to fill out information through a tablet, which will be instantaneously available to the staff at the city offices who can answer questions, who can submit those approved permits to the applicant and update the information that way. And then ultimately across the board with both Dynamics and Mazik City, one of the key reasons that we selected the Dynamics 365 platform is that it has the opportunity to grow with the city. So it's constantly changing. It can evolve, which was important to us because things change rapidly now, and we will continue to grow as an organization, and having the ability to have a flexible system that can grow with us was important. And with that, unless Kevin wants to supplement anything I said, if I forgot to mention anything. Okay.
The only thing I think I would throw in there is we wanted to point out, the only thing that probably will not be available through the self-service portal for payment will be related to police tickets. That'll be handled through just that is in place. So just wanted to make sure we got that out as well.
Thank you. Yes. Because of the integration with the different police departments and the county and all of the records maintenance that they're doing at the county level with all of the different police and county departments, it did not make sense to try to incorporate that because they have a separate portal to take parking tickets that will be countywide and accessible throughout. So with that, I am happy to answer questions, as is Kevin.
Thank you for the excellent review and the update with what's going on with this enormous program. I believe Alderman Davalos has a question.
Enormous seems not to be a big enough word.
It's not.
Wow. I mean, it's one reason this is really great is that we get to hear from you, and we get to really know what's going on and understand the delays and that sort of thing. So thank you very much for putting this together and for not quitting because I think it's going to be great. It's just I can see how big it is. I just have two. They're not just two smaller questions. So as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about the Public Works study we did with 30 or 40. I can't even remember the name of it. The services and whatever. Yeah. And I've always been impressed with that, how that's getting done. And as we get reports on it, it seems to really be getting done. But I can see some of the things on that list, actually, you sort of talked around the edges of with this. So I'm assuming this will have an effect on even making that implementation sooner and more efficient and easier. Can you just comment on that?
Absolutely. And yes, the Novak study and the Public Works staffing updates include action items related to work orders, inventory of items. I think it's got the preventative maintenance or some level of maintenance included. You'll probably note at the next update that those tend to have notes next to them that say that they're in progress awaiting the ERP. So that is all has all been incorporated into the requirements gathering that we've done with Mazik City in terms of having those inventories, having those preventative maintenance schedules, creating a work order program so that whether the service request is submitted from the public or from internally, it will be basically turned into a work order, assigned a unique identifier, forwarded to the supervisor who's in charge of that division, who will then determine who the correct team or person is to handle that. There will be an opportunity to track all of that information, to run reports on that information. Those are all components that are being built in to Mazik City as part of the requirements.
Okay, great, great. My other question is community development, and I think this is a website issue and not you, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. So I get a lot of questions about the construction projects around town, and the first thing I do is refer people to the website, and I tell them how to get to each construction project and read the papers if they're. That won't be changed. Well, people will still access that information through the website. Does this change any of that community development database or data
So
for the public?
The public-facing construction updates will likely still be on the website. I don't believe that we're building in anything through this system that would address that, other than, again, if they're submitting a permit, they can track the permit, but that's not necessarily related to the construction project. So that will not change, but that is something in terms of the way that we have content on the website that will be part of the website redesign discussion. That's part of item, I don't think it's not the next one, but the one after that on the website redesign.
Yeah, I don't personally have a problem with how people can access that construction and information. I mean, I think that's straightforward. So I guess I was worried it would be changed. But anyway, thank you very much.
That'll stay the same.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay. That was an informational item. Thank you very much. So we'll attend the Warrenville and Blues Symposium on October 3rd and go live with ERP on October 4th. And then March 6th, we have the other part of it, right? So mark it all down on your calendars. Exciting fall to look forward to. The next item is the consideration of a contract extension with Baycor Group for Enterprise Resource Planning Project Management Services. And if she's still willing and got her voice, Assistant City Administrator Christina White will again provide us with all the information we need to know about this topic. Christina?
Thank you. So as a follow-up to the presentation, we discussed a few meetings back the extension of the timeline, and that that would likely result in a need to extend the project management services with Baycor Group. As you may recall, we began a contract with them also in May of last year with City Council authorization to move forward with the ERP project. That work has been necessary to continue this project down the right course. I tried to mention this throughout the presentation, but I'll mention it again. Baycor has been part of helping us with best practices, with the development of processes, with keeping the project on track, responding to tasks and questions, making sure that the tasks assigned to city staff are being responded to in a timely fashion, coordinating the variety of meetings and phone calls and follow-ups that are needed with the project, and kind of herding all of the different levels of cats throughout both the city and through Mazik. Those are duties and tasks that are extremely time-consuming, and with the city staff acting as the subject matter experts throughout this project, would be extremely challenging for us to also act as the project managers and keep track of all of the timelines and the tasks and the to-dos. They do a very good job with that. They have the experience. They've worked through implementation on this type of software in other communities, so they offer that level of expertise and experience that we don't have on this type of project. And so staff is recommending that we extend the contract the 6 months, which is included as a provision in our current contract that allows us a 6-month extension. We are also asking to expand the scope because utility billing wasn't initially included, to cover project management for utility billing. And included within the agenda backup material, there's two possible amendments. We did want to give the council the option, if continuing with utility billing is not a priority or not something that we want to invest in at this time, there is an amendment that would just be for contract management services. That's Exhibit B in the backup. But again, staff is recommending both because we feel pretty strongly that from a cost-effective perspective and an implementation perspective, it makes more sense to include utility billing in this overall project than to try to implement it as a separate project and then integrate it back with Dynamics later. We believe pretty strongly, given how this process has gone, that going through an entirely new RFP and an entirely new project for utility billing will be much more time-consuming and cost prohibitive than doing it with this project. And with that, I will answer any questions.
Any questions? Alderman Goodman?
My question was just about the fact that the Mazik City piece and the D365 piece are ending at different times, but the per month cost for Bay Corps seems to be the same throughout, even though at some point, unless I'm reading this incorrectly, the D365 part will be done, and all we will have going forward is the Mazik City piece. So is their workload going to remain the same?
That is correct. The contract, the way that it's written, and we did address this with them, it does keep the cost, the monthly cost, the same even after the implementation of Dynamics 365 is concluded, and we're just working on the Mazik City component. The concern that they've had is, given that there's a lot of moving parts to the implementation of the core ERP, they want to make sure that before they reduce the contract amount, that there is a completion and that the follow-up at the end of the implementation is truly done. There is a period after the actual go-live date where we will still be likely catching minor things that need to be changed. At that point, there shouldn't be anything major, and we will reevaluate the monthly contract costs with them at that time, and they have committed to do so. And we'll likely see a reduction, assuming that everything with the Dynamics 365 portion is truly completed after go live.
Okay, but fixing bugs and dealing with errors, is that really a project management level? Well, I suppose it depends on the bug.
Right. So without knowing exactly what we're going to run into, because we are still in the early testing iterations with the project, we haven't really seen the full extent of all of the integrations that we've created and all of the customizations. It's hard to tell at this point if once we go live, it's, working exactly the way we intended, or if there's going to be the need to come back and rediscuss potential processes or issues that we run into. So I would agree that once we get to that point, there shouldn't be the level of issues or bugs that would rise to the level of needing project management services, but not knowing exactly where we're going to be, they wanted to maintain the current cost and then reevaluate it so that we have it built in right now until that implementation is completed and we go live and reevaluate at that point.
But that wasn't a part of their original proposal, right? Continuing to be project management for several months after the implementation of the second piece is done, for example, is not part of this current extension either.
Correct.
So that seems a little strange to me. If they do come back and renegotiate the price down, we wouldn't be in a very strong negotiating position either. I don't know. That sounds a little strange to me.
Well, we can ask them to include a provision within the change order that would allow us to come back and renegotiate that, so that there is at least some language written into the change order to commit them to reevaluating the cost at that time.
Okay.
Alderman Wilson?
I have just a question on the figures here on the action request. You indicate you want $96,550, and yet you divided it into budgetary impact of $67,200 and then $18,150. I think if I added those together, it comes up to $85,350. There's a discrepancy in those numbers, or am I adding them wrong?
You are adding them correctly. The memo included at the bottom a correction. So the original contract with Baycor was for a 17-month implementation from start to finish with both the core ERP and Mazik City. When that was budgeted, there was a miscalculation and only 16 months were included instead of 17 months. So one of the items requested in the memo is to also correct that 1 month shortage from the budget with this action all at the same time. So that's the $11,200 difference from the number to what's in the motion.
Okay, based upon that, I'd like to make a motion to recommend the City Council approve Exhibit A, Bicor Amendment 1A, for a 6-month extension of the Bicor Group contract and the inclusion of utility billing, and direct staff to prepare fiscal year 2020 budget amendment in the amount of $96,550.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Item number 5 on the agenda this evening is consideration of a water and sewer rate increase, and Finance Director Kevin Dahlstrom will provide us with the information regarding this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Included in the 2020 budget was a proposed 5% water and 5% sewer rate increase. Both of those would be effective May 1 of 2019. They would first be seen on any bills in July of 2019, as our current software does not allow us to prorate how we would change that rate increase, and that's what we've always done anytime we've had a rate increase. We estimate that a house of 4 would see an increase in their annual bill of $43.32. I want to point out also that this would not be, this is the beginning stages of water rate increases over the years. We will be looking to reestablish the EMRP work group. There will be a consideration of appointing elected officials to work with city staff on the Public Safety and Finance Committee meeting at the end of the month. The EMRP, as I've mentioned a number of times before, did not set rate structures going forward. That's the one sort of key element that we missed within that plan. We'll look to re-establish that work group and make sure that we do have a plan moving forward for how our rates will need to increase. So this rate gets us through the current year and allows that EMRP work group to do some additional work for future recommendations on our water and sewer rates.
Thank you. Questions? Alderman Goodman?
How was the 5% number arrived at?
So as we look through, we wanted to provide some additional amount of increase for the current year, knowing that we would need additional rates going forward, but we were not able to establish our long-term rate. So we just determined that a small enough rate increase would allow us some time to accumulate additional revenue within the fund, but still allow us some time to work on a long-term plan.
Okay, so this is the beginning of a series of rate increases. I mean, you're saying we're going to reestablish the work group and we're going to look at a plan going forward, but that plan is going to be how fast to raise rates, not whether or when necessarily.
Most likely, yes, absolutely. There are a number of things when the EMRP was worked on that were not even in consideration at the time, our largest one being the I&I program, which was not even discussed at that time, and those costs will have to be built into the EMRP going forward.
Okay, so this revenue, we're talking about $150,000. That's a per year estimate based on current water and sewer usage. Have you done any consideration of how that will affect new water users that are going to be coming online under all the various proposed construction projects? Is that in the same ballpark, a much smaller number, a negligible amount compared to the $150,000?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I think are you asking what impact they will have on our ability to raise or to receive revenue for the water bills?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the revenues of those new projects and additional revenue that would be expected under a higher rate system.
considering that we have very few of those in place yet, that has been considered a little bit, but it'll be one of the things we will have to consider in the EMRP work group.
Okay, I know we've approved some new construction. Some new construction is going forward. We will have people moving into the new houses next door here. I guess my question just has to do with the fact that our existing systems have to be maintained and have to be repaired and replaced and so on. And we're building new systems which are going to have hopefully much longer lifetimes than the systems that we've already discussed and worked out their replacement and their life expectancies for, which have already been largely used up. So the newer systems, we've got a lot more time before we have to worry about replacing or repairing it, because we're still building those. So I guess my question is, higher rates for those right now, for newer water and sewer areas of town, are going to help subsidize some of the repairs for existing systems. I guess that's my only point.
Well, connect the new construction do pay tap-on fees when they tap on, so they do contribute additional revenue in that regard, and there will be some additional revenue received through their usage as well. So those things will be in consideration as we work our way forward with the EMRP. Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, when you have a bigger system, then your total repair and replacement costs are likewise going to go up. But the present day value of that might be quite small if it's very far into the future, as hopefully the new systems are.
Correct.
Okay, and then we have more years of those new systems under any given set of higher rates to help pay for themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, within the background that you gave us for this evening's proposal on this, you have a chart that talks about the annual municipal rates and revenues surveys for other areas, and I just wonder if you could briefly just describe where the city of Warrenville is with their rate structure compared to other municipalities.
Absolutely. Annually, the DMMC conducts a tax rate and revenue survey. One of the things that they do include in our sewer and water rates. When you compare the city of Warrenville water and sewer rates to, there's approximately, I think, 12 other communities here. We are the lowest community by a considerable amount, especially on our water rate. Even if we were to double our water rate alone, we would still be the lowest water rate in DuPage County. One of the things to point out there that may make sure everybody understands, a lot of the other communities are on with the DuPage Water Commission and use Lake Michigan water, where ours are on wells, are locally controlled wells. So even if we were to double our rates would still be the lowest.
Thank you. I believe Alderman Bevere, did you have a question?
Yeah, you kind of answered it. I was curious how many of the towns on this list, they're probably all on Lake Michigan water. There ain't too many towns out there that are like us on our own well.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? If not, Alderman Goodman.
I would make a motion to recommend that the City Council approve a 5% water rate increase and a 5% sewer rate increase, effective May 1st, 2019, and direct staff to prepare a corresponding ordinance.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries, and we're on to item number 6, consideration of assigning aldermen to work with city staff members on the city website redesign work group. And City Administrator, or Assistant City Administrator Christina White will provide us with the information on this.
Thank you.
Christina?
The city's website is on a platform with Civic Plus, the hosting company that is going to be phased out at the end of this year. So therefore, as part of that process, we need to upgrade our platform to the newest version of the website. part of that within our current contract with Civic Plus is a provision to redesign the current website. So we are going to begin that process. We've had an initial kickoff meeting with Civic Plus, a phone conversation with them to discuss kind of the big picture, high level timeline that goes along with this project. To assist in making some of the decisions that will have a public impact in terms of the layout, the design, just the overall look of the website. We are asking to have 1 or 2 elected officials join our website redesign work group that's comprised of city staff from various departments, and then whoever would like to volunteer to be part of that work group with us to discuss those higher level design discussions. We think it's beneficial to have a variety of perspectives on that work group so that we can end up with a good outward-facing website that ultimately gives our residents the information and our businesses and visitors the information that they need when they're looking at our website. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the city website proposal? And if not, I guess the second question is, you can give me a show of hands if there's anyone that is interested in being on a work group. We do try and limit it to 2 aldermen just so that we don't have to get involved with announcing additional public meetings. But is anyone interested? I see 2 hands go up immediately, so that allows the rest of us to back off. But we do appreciate Alderman Goodman and Alderman Kreschel stepping forward and joining a committee to help redevelop the city's website. It's a long time coming, and it'll be an exciting project to see how this evolves and what comes forward with this. So thank you for your involvement and participation. And if there's someone who would like to make a motion authorizing this small work group with Alderman Kreschel and Goodman, it would be great. Alderman Goodman.
I would like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council appoint Alderman Krischel and myself as the City Council's representatives on the website redesign work group.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is consideration of authorization to begin the recruitment process for fleet management technician position. Deputy Public Works Director Phil Kukler will provide the details on this agenda topic. Phil?
Thank you. The city's equipment maintenance lead supervisor is retiring at the end of May. So staff's been evaluating the job description and how we want to proceed moving forward with the replacement of that staff member. We're recommending modification of the job description and continuing to utilize outside vendors for work that can't be done in-house, whether that be due to the complexity of a certain repair or just workload of the mechanic. It's very similar to what is done now. We're not recommending to add a staff person. We've started talks with the Forest Preserve District because they have their new fleet maintenance facility up on Mack Road. We're already fueling vehicles there. There's the possibility of they've indicated they have a capacity to take on additional fleet maintenance work if we were to need that. So we're started discussions with them. Very preliminary, but I anticipate we'll probably be coming back with a proposed IGA with the Forest Preserve District to be able to help supplement the city's staff for fleet maintenance. But the main differences in the job description from the current one to what we're proposing are, first, the name of the position is going to be Fleet Management Technician. We're trying to put more of an emphasis on fleet management. We're going to have, with the implementation of the new ERP, the staff person is going to have much more technology at their hands and a better tool to help proactively manage our fleet. The position is going to report to the street division lead supervisor as opposed to myself. I think Jamie can provide better supervision to that position, and also probably quicker response and answers when sometimes I'm not as available as Jamie is to be able to respond to questions that the mechanic might have. And then with the ERP being a Microsoft-based system, we've been sure to update the job description with the knowledge of software and Microsoft-based programs. So they are familiar. I mean, I've been looking at the ERP and being involved in that group. With that being a Microsoft-based system, it's very similar to, like, if you look at the Lada Word or Excel or PowerPoint, the various Microsoft programs. There's a very consistent layout to that. So this person being familiar with that type of those type of programs and software would be a much easier transition to using the new ERP software. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We're really looking for direction to go out to begin recruiting for this position immediately.
Questions regarding the fleet management technician positions? Alderman Goodman?
Would it make sense for the modification of this position descriptions to be done with input from the staffing study, since we're assessing the city's staffing levels and what things are being contracted and which things are being done in-house, and we've got that sort of process in train?
The challenge with that is the recruiting takes probably 3 months at a minimum to get somebody on board. And so if we start May 21st to go start of the next council meeting, when hopefully we'd have formal direction to move forward, it would take probably till August or September before we'd actually have somebody on board. I don't even think that staffing study or service levels and staffing study would be complete by then. I'm not sure what the exact time frame is, but it wouldn't even complete by then. So you'd be, whenever that would be complete, it'd be tacking on a good 3 to 4 months probably to get somebody on board, and we would need somebody on board a lot sooner than that.
Right, but presumably if he's retiring at the end of May and you wouldn't have anybody on board until August anyway, you're going to have to be outsourcing this in the meantime, and the time to decide whether or not to hire somebody is before they're hired, not so in between positions. If you're going to be dealing with this transition anyway, wouldn't an additional month or two of transition make more sense than firing somebody? And I'm not talking specifically about this position, I'm talking about generally while we're doing a staffing study.
Yeah, the challenge with this position, I don't see a way that we would be without mechanic services on staff somewhere. While we can outsource a lot of things, it's really difficult to outsource somebody that can respond at an emergency during a water main break or a snow event immediately. And this having somebody on staff to be able to handle that is a really big priority for our public works staff. There's a lot of things we can't outsource. We've talked about the possibility of outsourcing some of the regular maintenance, this regularly scheduled maintenance like oil changes and that type of stuff to, the police department's fleet.
But didn't you just say that we're going to have to deal with that anyway?
Yes.
Because
we will. We've done it for short periods of time. But if we're going to extend this the rest of the year, you're getting into this preparation for snow removal and getting all the vehicles outfitted for that. And like I said, I don't see any way that we'd be without a mechanic on staff. I mean, this is a critical position for the city. If it turned out as a result of that study that we wanted to add a second staff person, that'd be something different. But I don't see that this would be eliminated. I don't think there's a danger in deciding we'd end up firing somebody or something like that, or eliminating a position later
But
on.
I'm not talking about eliminating the position. I'm talking about changing what you've brought to us here is a request to modify the position and change the work requirements and change which services this person is going to be able to provide. So it seems relevant to me that the staffing study would weigh in on what services. I mean, I guess you're saying we're not modifying the position very much, maybe.
No, we aren't. There's more of an emphasis for sure on fleet management and having those capabilities. This is a position that Vern's held for, I think, for something like 24 years now. So it hasn't been a really large evolution in his position because he's been here for so long. But there's a need to more proactively maintain the fleet and be again proactive and letting community development know when the pool car might need to have an oil change instead of relying on them to come to us with that information, and work with the police department to actually proactively maintain their stuff as opposed to, again, relying on the other staff to come to us with that stuff. And there will be, with the ERP in place, there will be a tool to help them do that much more effectively than Vern can do now.
I understand. I just don't think that answers my question.
Well, I guess I don't believe that the study is going to change the need for what we have for this position.
I didn't say that. I said it's going to change the modifications to the position, the work requirements.
Sure,
The,
I
the
don't believe
person whom we would hire might be somebody different with different sets of skills.
The person we're going to hire is going to have to be a mechanic first. They're going to have basic mechanic skills because they have to be able to. We're not, regardless of what the study says and what I'm saying right now from Vern, they have to be able to work on. They have to have a mechanics background, and they have to be able to do that. They have to be capable of also managing the fleet more proactively than Vern does. That's just a need of the position. I don't see the study changing what the description of this position is going to be.
Okay.
Thank you. Alderman Bevere?
Yeah, maybe I missed it in there. Is he going to be working on the police cars, stuff like that too?
It-
Because there has to be a special qualification to be certified when you're doing that stuff, and I didn't know, I didn't see it in here, but maybe I overlooked it.
What we're looking for first and foremost is somebody who can work on equipment and things that are going to be in emergencies. Police vehicles, I don't think there's a special certification. I think for fire district vehicles, there are special certifications that are required. But police, I don't believe there are special certifications. We do use an outside vendor to outfit them with all the lights and wiring and all that stuff specific to change them from just a regular Explorer to a police vehicle. But that's I don't believe there's any special certification for that. Vern doesn't have that right now.
Yeah, maybe you should check into it, because I know when I worked at the county that they had to be a certain qualification to work on the brakes for the police cars. If you didn't have that qualification, you couldn't do the work. So maybe things changed, but I would, see if that needs to get thrown into the mix.
Sure.
Alderman Barry?
So, if the full-time mechanic that we have at the moment is leaving at the end of May, you're going to hire temporarily a contractor to fill the position until someone is hired, is that it?
No, we'll utilize outside vendors. When Vern has
That's
been on,
like an outside vendor, contractor vendor.
be a variety of them, depending on what the need is. If it's oil changes, they might go to one place. If there's tires or something, it might go to another place. But when Vern's been on leave before, extended leave before, he's developed a list of outside vendors that he uses regularly that we can use to contact for different maintenance activities over the coming months.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Alderman Wilson?
I'd like to make a recommendation to the city council. I'd like to recommend the city council direct staff to proceed with the recruitment for the position of fleet management technician.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries, and the next item on the agenda is the consideration of the proposed traffic calming measures, and Deputy Public Works Director Phil Kukler will provide us with the information on this. Phil?
As you may recall, staff was directed to hold a public information meeting to present our recommendation for traffic calming in Warrenville Road. And we held that meeting on Wednesday, April 17th here in the City Council chambers in the evening. As a result of that, our recommendation is modified slightly in that we're incorporating the installation of stop signs at Warrenville Road at Rockwell, and continuing our recommendation to include the construction of median islands at Mignon Drive. The reasons behind this two-part recommendation are staff had our consultants study the intersection of Rockwell and Warrenville Road to determine whether it met the stop sign warrants. And after reviewing it, the consultants recommending installation of stop signs there, and that's primarily due to the vertical curve, the hill to the east as you're stopped at the stop sign trying to look back to the east past the church. There's parking in that area, and there's also a hill that make it difficult to see. So they're recommending installation of stop signs at that intersection. As we've noted previously, the traffic speeds are expected to increase at least a little bit with the replacement of the rougher brick road with a smoother asphalt road. Last fall, when we were presenting the recommendation to reconstruct Warrenville Road with asphalt, we did hear from some elected officials and some residents that were present that there was a concern for traffic calming. And even though a stop sign is recommended at Rockwell, their stop signs aren't considered traffic calming. The staff and the city's consultant determined that the location most in need of traffic calming is the area between Rockwell and Aurora Way. And median islands, our conclusion was that median islands would cause the least amount of additional work to the project and still achieve the desired results of slowing traffic down. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the recommendations.
Questions from the alderman? Alderman Bevere? Or, I'm sorry, Ashour?
My concerns are with the medians. I don't think they're a necessary expense. The stop sign at Rockwell takes care of the concerns of most of the residents that you talked to that were probably the biggest complainers. They now will have a stop sign within 150 feet of their driveways in all cases. There was no public support, even though it was not a well-attended meeting, for medians in any way. And the other thing that just is kind of sticks in my craw is that we have suggestions for budgetary impact that says the budget contains sufficient funds, and it does not identify the costs associated with the project or the replacement value and how it's going to raise the budget in the future for something that is now a perceived need rather than a actual one. I mean, anyone who is on that road and is heading eastbound or westbound, but either way, but long before you get to Mignon on Warrenville Road, you're going to see the stop sign at Rockwell. That it is elevated, which is also why the warrants were apparently satisfied, because there is a hump there and there is a visibility problem, but it also enhances the visibility of the stop sign. And there will be additional signage that says stop ahead. Are you recommending the same type of loops that the other stop signs have? I couldn't tell from the backup whether that was a recommendation.
Yes, I'd want to be consistent with what we're doing with the other two stop signs at Warren and at Curtis, so they'd be the LED stop signs with the detector loops.
So there would be at Rockwell also?
Yes.
So when somebody's heading either way and there's a car ahead of them, it's going to activate the stop sign LEDs. The visibility is going to be pretty good at that location. I don't see where the medians are going to offer any value other than an annoyance and problems for our city trucks getting in and out, and having it look like the one that is down by the Prairie Path at the end of Warrenville Road, close to Butterfield, where it is constantly a rut. The plantings are destroyed, and the buses do it, everything does it. I think it's overkill. I think it's an unnecessary expense. We can spend $100 on 2 stop signs and the loops and not spend it on the medians. I disagree with that use, and I couldn't find anybody else that agreed with it other than you and our other city engineer and 2 consulting engineers, none that live in town or regularly travel the road. So that's my point. I agree with the stop sign. I think it was well thought out. It was considered the right ways. It meets warrants. It takes away the legal issues that everybody's concerned about. The medians are, in my opinion, a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Thank you. Alderman Bevere?
Yeah, I'm in favor of the stop signs too, but not the mediums. See a lot of people bumping off them constantly, and they're wrecking their tires, and there's people out there doing landscape work constantly. If a truck turns the wrong corner and cuts through there, he goes right over that stuff, and they got trailers coming out of the city garage with backhoes on them and everything. I'm in favor of the stop signs, but not the islands.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman, or Mayor's got a question. Go ahead.
Specifically, why are you recommending the medians? And I presume you've already considered our equipment coming and going and whether or not it will function in that situation?
Yeah, our equipment won't have a problem maneuvering through that intersection, but the reason we considered medians at all was, again, we heard from a handful of elected officials and residents, and granted, it wasn't 50 residents here complaining about it, but the residents that were here in the fall, at least the ones that spoke up, were concerned about speeds on the road. And Alderman Ashaw is correct. The handful of households that were here and represented on April 17th, none of them were in favor of the medians. I think one gentleman did reference, well, if we can't get a stop sign, then I'd be in favor of just doing something. But he wasn't. His first choice was not the median. So I don't want to. Alderman Ashaw is completely correct on that. But this is our attempt to try to respond to a desire or stated desire for traffic calming by some people. And again, it wasn't all 8 elected officials during that meeting. I'm not trying to misrepresent that, but there were people at that meeting that expressed concerns about traffic calming. This is our recommendation to deal with that.
Okay, and this measure, these medians are efficacious in other applications. I mean, this is a standard procedure that's used as traffic calming, and it works.
Yes, and part of the reason, Alderman Bureau referenced people bumping off of them, they're probably driving too fast.
Okay,
And
and,
you've got 11-foot lanes going around them. They're meant to slow people down.
and the placement of these particular medians is, you've chosen that particular placement for a reason.
Yeah, it helps to break up that section of between Rockwell and Aurora Way. That's an area that if you're driving down the rest of the corridor east of there, I'm not gonna say it feels like it's closing in on you, but it feels narrower. There's houses on both sides generally, except for by the cemetery. There's trees and streetlights as you get to there where the ball fields are. It has a feeling of opening up. And if you feel the roadway's a little more opened up, you're probably likely to drive faster. So
Okay.
that's why we targeted that particular area.
And the medians at the end, down by Butterfield Road, there's a slightly different situation there in terms of the crook in the road where people drive. This is not going to be the same situation for these medians because it's going to be a straight section of road. So you don't anticipate that people are going to have trouble driving over these.
No, not. I mean, and there would be striping leading up to them to help channel the traffic toward them too, as opposed to just having a curb in the middle of the street that they may not see till the last minute.
Thank you.
Alderman Kreschel?
How long are what's the length of the median on each side? I can't really read it on the map there.
It's a good question. So I don't think I've seen a drawing yet with a dimension on it, but probably about 50 feet long.
So 50 on one side of Mignon and 50 on the other?
Yes.
Okay. And then is the shape depicted correctly? It's more of a teardrop rather than, an oval as we have in place today?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. One more question. So I guess the concern I have is the stop sign at Rockwell is going to be put in if we agree to that. I think, even in the MUTC guideline, it says that stop signs are not to be used for speed control. I think in September, the council asked for Public Works to go back and look at traffic calming, so that stop sign is not actually traffic calming. My concern is that once people leave that stop sign, it's now back to a higher rate of speed from there until Butterfield Road. So for that reason, I think those medians would be able to control that speed.
Thank you. Alderman Goodman?
One of the things I didn't see anywhere in here had to do with striping. When you, for example, add the stripe that we did on Batavia Road to make the road look a little narrower, that has a psychological impact and apparently is a traffic calming measure to slow people down. But that doesn't seem to have been considered.
No, and I honestly, because I worked with Mike Smith on the striping on Batavia Road, I don't feel I need to drive any slower going down Batavia Road, even around the curve, than I did before. It doesn't. I would, if there was a bicyclist on the side of the road, I would definitely feel like I had to slow down. But I feel like I can drive 30 or 35 miles an hour around that curve the same as I could before. It didn't narrow it so drastically that I felt like I really did. In this case, the road itself is 22 feet wide in terms of pavement. That's 2 11-foot lanes. It's not. I mean, we could add a center line stripe. I'm not sure that would make much of a difference in people speeding down the road. It's still a 22-foot wide road.
Well, I mean, okay, anecdotally, I'm not concerned about people going around that curve at 30 or 35. It was slowing down the people who were going 45 and too fast. And I feel anecdotally, it did slow some people down.
That may be true. I don't drive 45 around that curve, so.
Good. That's good. But it just seemed to me like one solution that wasn't considered here and might help a little bit. I know that in roads that look narrower, these studies have been done. Even if the road width isn't changed, it does slow people down.
I'm not opposed to striping. It's just it's something will be added maintenance over the years. I mean, the medians are also added maintenance, so it's.
Right, but a stripe doesn't seem that expensive compared to. So I know that Alderman Ashour expressed concern about the budget.
No, it's stripe would not be as expensive. We'd paint them probably every year or every other year. We'd have a contractor come and do that.
Okay, well, that might be a compromise idea. I'm not necessarily opposed to the medians, but I see that there are some that aren't, so I'm trying to come up with a compromise.
Alderman Berry?
I did attend the meeting that was open to the public regarding the traffic calming. And basically there were about, I think, maybe 4 families there, maybe 5, who attended the meeting. So obviously, I don't know if this was a big issue for them or not, because I think if it was, then we would have had a lot more people. I understand that traffic stop signs are not going to make people slow down. I like Alderman Goodman's recommendation to stripe the road. I know that I drive on Butterfield at least 2 times a day, back and forth to work, or not Butterfield, Batavia. And the traffic is slower there once the bicycle lanes were put in, and it appeared that the driving lane was narrower. People do drive the 35 miles an hour. Very, very few people go over that, where before it was everyone went over 35 miles an hour. It was closer to 40. I agree with Alderman Ashour and Alderman Bevere that I would prefer that the medians would not be put in. I don't mind the stop signs. I think that's a good idea. I don't know if Rockwell is too close to Curtis, if Mignon would be better, because at least it would be a stop sign where people would have to stop, because the trucks are coming in and out of where Public Works is located. And but I just don't see the need for the medians myself. And it appeared that most of the people that were here, I don't think they were in favor of the median. If I can remember correctly, I don't know if Alderman Ashour agrees with me, but it just didn't appear that they were that interested in having a median.
Alderman Ashour?
Just that the stop sign at Rockwell splits that section of road between Curtis and the Prairie Path almost in half. I just don't see the need. I mean, if we're gonna put in medians, how come we don't put one in between Curtis and Rockwell? I don't know. I'm lost on something. I think it's an unnecessary expense. It is not a popular choice. We have a history of unpopular choices around there. The need for a stop sign at Rockwell is warranted because of the visibility and the curve in the hill. We also don't have a traffic study that verifies that it in fact is a speeding problem, and there is no question that a stop sign halfway between Curtis and the Prairie Path is going to change the way people drive. I don't believe that they're going to be on it to the metal, away from that stop sign in both directions, like has been indicated by the people I've spoken to that are in favor of the medians. So I still disagree with it.
Alderman Wilson, did you have a comment?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Alderman Davalos?
Can you repeat what you said about why the stop signs at Rockwell and not Mignon? It was an engineer talking about a site issue.
Before I answer, I do want to point out, I failed to point out earlier, there is a corrected motion in a memo that was at the ice for everybody too. So, okay, just want to make sure if you're going to make the motion. There's Alderman Goodman pointed that out over the weekend that I had made a mistake in the actual motion in the summary. So I want to make sure that if you're making the motion, you're making the one that I was recommending, and you can vote appropriately. But Alderman Davalos, yes, your question, the engineer looked at the sight lines, stopping sight distance. So as you're looking from Rockwell to the east, there's a hill, and you have to there's a minimum stopping sight distance is required. It's dependent on the posted speed on the roadway. In order for both the person stopping, they would have to stop for somebody to be pulling out, has a chance to react to them. And also then it works both ways. It works for the person pulling out, being able to see that person, knowing they have a far enough distance to be able to pull out safely. So that's the justification for doing it at Rockwell as opposed to Mignon. At Mignon, you don't have any such problem with sight distance.
Alderman Wilson?
I'd like to make a recommendation that the city council, 1, pass an ordinance approving stop signs on Warrenville Road at Rockwell Street and direct staff to install the stop signs. And 2, direct staff to install median islands on Warrenville Road at Mignon Drive during the upcoming Warrenville Road reconstruction project.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and a second. I would just like to add that when we first started looking at the pavers for this street, we recognized as an entryway into our city, and we were trying to offer some amount of visual relief as well as recognizing that people had a pattern of driving excessively fast down that section and that the pavers would slow them down. I think the stop sign will help, but you know, how many times have you seen somebody accelerate at a high rate of speed away from a stop sign? Certainly, I think studies bear that out, that people try to make up for lost time when they leave stop signs. So I think the median would offer kind of an aesthetic entrance into the city. We certainly looked at this when we were studying Butterfield Road and added all kinds of elements that would provide visual relief and tie into our motto of Warrenville naturally. And I think that any amount of traffic that uses this road, the local traffic will certainly learn of the median and be able to carefully avoid the obstruction that might be there. We've certainly seen them work in other communities, and I think it'll be an attractive element. And with that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Oh, wait. I'm sorry, we're, I guess, moving ahead with the motion. I did not see your hand. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Opposed?
Nay. So, once again, I did not get the, is that a tie or is that? It was an aye for the nay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Raise your hand. All those opposed? The mayor, did you have?
Yeah, I was just
some-
going to say, sometime, the tradition has been in committee meetings.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 9, to review and file the Community Development Department's fiscal year 2019 work program and design package status report. If no one has any comments or questions regarding that, we'll accept those and file them. And seeing none, we'll move on to item number 10, to review and file quarterly economic development report. Again, if anyone has any questions or comments, and I see Alderman Goodman has her hand up. Alderman Goodman, go ahead.
Yeah, my question on the economic development activity report is for Family Foods. Does that still remain closed, and do we know how long it will be? It was closed. It was closed.
Community Development Director Ron Menser, would you care to answer the question?
I can report that I visited the property last Friday and they were open.
So they've
They were
reopened.
not serving, or they were not selling any alcohol at the time. They haven't secured the necessary state permits to be able to do that, the new owners that is. But the business transaction between Phil Salerno and the new owners has been completed or closed, and there are new owners of the business now. And they've made some changes into the interior spaces of the store to open things up already. It does look and feel just a little different inside. So it is open, and they're intending to continue to make changes and reinvest into the store and hopefully grow its business over time.
Okay, because we went there to shop and it was closed, and I got questions from people. Thank you.
Mayor, did you have an additional comment?
I talked with the one of the new owners recently, and their intention is to stay open. They did have a problem with the state liquor license. They applied in time, and they're sitting on their hands waiting for the state to reply. So that's the problem that they had there. They have spent an enormous amount of time cleaning and rearranging and trying to refurbish the situation in the store. And little by little, they're going to make improvements. But there is a strong commitment to turning that store into something far nicer than it was.
And we have a comment from Finance Director Dahlstrom.
I just wanted to add that they have been issued a City of Warrenville liquor license, and they cannot obtain a state one without ours first. So they do have one from us, and whenever they work out their situation with the state, then they would be able to sell alcohol legally.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, for the updates. And we'll go ahead and review and file the quarterly economic development report. Again, moving on to item 11, we review and file the quarterly commercial space vacancy report. And if there's any questions or comments about that, seeing none, we'll accept and file those. And moving on to item 12, to review and file the bi-monthly code enforcement activity report. And again, if anyone has any questions or comments, bring them forward now. Otherwise, we'll do as we did with the others and accept and file these reports. And there's nothing to discuss under miscellaneous, and there's no closed session, so we have one final action to make. Who would care to make it? Alderman Goodman.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
A motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Good night, everyone.